In my opinion, one of the biggest challenges with just being a human being in the 21st century is we are becoming so lonely and so isolated in a large way just due to technology. We're spending way more time on our phones looking at screens than we are connecting with people in real life. And I have just started to realize this is such a massive issue that I've really started to shape my entire Substack and a lot of the content that I'm putting out online to help people learn to build friendships and community and to start relationships with people in the modern world. One of the people in my life that is the best at that skill and has some of the most life-giving, rich friendships is my brother Josh, who lives in Mexico. And so I actually just went and visited him for a few days a few weeks ago, just to get some time with him, hang out with my nephew, who's his son, and just get to be a part of his life out there for a little bit. So I decided that when I was down there, it would be a good idea to just sit down with him, record a conversation, and pick his brain a little bit on how he has built friendships and relationships, because again, he is just a master at that in a lot of ways. And I also just have a lot of respect for the way he's done it through so many different seasons of his life. So anyway, this is my conversation with my brother Josh. It's a little bit longer than most of my podcasts are just because there were so many good things we were getting into and we were drinking tea during it. So you just kind of get lost in the sauce a little bit, but I really think every single second of it is going to be helpful for someone who has struggled to build friendships and community in their life. So I hope you guys enjoy this one. Thanks so much for watching and let me know what you think in the comments. Yeah, so this episode is going to make a lot more sense if you're watching it on YouTube, but if you're listening on Substack or Spotify, thanks so much for joining. We are currently in Mazatlan, Mexico. This is my brother Josh, who lives here, and we are going to do a Gong Fu Tea Ceremony, which I'm going to let you explain what that is, but Josh is somewhat of an expert in tea, worked in a tea shop for a long time, has researched it, and is just an avid tea aficionado. He has a massive collection of all kinds of different teas from all around the world at his house, and he's constantly collecting. So, Josh, please explain to me what we're about to do.
I'm very happy to explain to you what this is. So, when I was younger, I was lacking in passions and things that felt like my own, and so finding tea ceremonies and working at a tea house in Colorado was kind of like something to hold on to, something to become passionate about, something to be a buff at. Mm-hmm. And so I remember like when I first kind of discovered like loose leaf tea and then kind of like deep tea, you know, it's the same with coffee. It's like there's certain like levels, and each one, the deeper you get, the more expansive it is and exciting and all the different tastes and stuff. Yep. So I just started buying certain teas and then just like sitting on my kitchen floor and like learning how to taste it. And like my goal was like, don't like learn to enjoy it just by itself and then find the best tea. And so it was just a really exciting season for me to do that. And it was just like something to hold on to, you know, something to get good at. So I learned from these two guys, these like mustached, like long haired guys that worked at the tea house. They were like, do you know what Gong Fu Cha is? I was like, definitely not. And so they like sat me down in this like low table with this tea table on top of it, and they were like pouring the water in all these little ways, and it was like the whole ceremony of like taking something as simple as to like bring a cup of tea, but making it perfect and like making it like a dance, like all of the process. And so it was just really beautiful. So I just started learning about loose leaf tea, about different parts of the world that were cultivating it, and kind of like, you know, the tasting notes, all the different things that existed. Yep. And then I learned that like basically this tea ceremony is about kind of this balance of like messy and order. And so like as you're doing it, you're spilling tea and spilling water the whole time. And so like there's these like it catches water under the table. Yeah. And then basically steeping by steeping, you just explore the tea together. Yeah. And so that's what I learned, and I feel like it's just become a part of ways to connect with people. And so yeah, I'd love to make you some tea today.
Cool. I think it's perfect. Yeah, let's get started.
Yeah. Okay. So we're gonna go first to Nepal. There is here, you should just smell this. This is a black tea from Nepal, but it's kind of like a golden black tea. So the notes are just like sweet and
very pungent.
Like sweet potato, and it just smells golden to me.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's technically a black tea, but there's not a ton of bitterness in it, and so that's really enjoyable for people that always think they need to add something to tea to make it less bitter. It was fun to learn that there are ways to make tea, and there are teas that are just naturally not that bitter.
Yep. And this is one of them.
This is one of them.
Dope. Why did you choose it for today?
I just go back to it all the time. I just find it reliable.
It's like your daily driver.
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah.
And Gong Fu is like a fairly ancient practice, right? Like, what are its roots? Where does it come from?
Yeah. So the tea ceremony has been around probably for at least maybe 200 or 300 years in China as this kind of setup.
Mm-hmm.
But they've been doing kind of ceremonial tea expressions and kind of making it part of their culture for about 2,000 years. That's when they started like cultivating tea as a beverage, and kind of like this is all like in ancient China and stuff.
Yeah.
And so there kind of was like different levels. Like it used to just kind of be medicinal. They used to just use it in soups and stuff like that. But when it came to like let's say what would that be, like 2000, like I don't know, around the year 0.
Mm-hmm.
There started to actually be like a tea culture, and so people started writing books about it and poetry and stuff like that, and it started to kind of be a part of Chinese culture. And so then there was kind of like levels of prestige, and then there was kind of like the honor teas that were served to the emperor and stuff like that were like as tribute and stuff.
Right.
And so that's kind of where tea culture started, was in China about 2,000 years ago.
Yep.
And yeah, basically they've kind of just been developing their own practice with it for a very long time.
Mm-hmm.
Which coffee only really has gotten its own kind of like modern culture of what we understand it to be today for about 400 years, from like the 1600s.
Yep.
But they've just kind of been keeping it a secret most of this time in China.
It's just quietly an absolute banger of a beverage.
Yeah. So how you start the Chinese tea ceremony is you kind of you do basically like a first rinse. And so basically this tea I'm just going to actually chuck, which people are like, wait, why would you do that? It's perfectly good. And basically the first steeping is both you're rinsing off the tea leaves and kind of opening the tea leaves up.
Kind of like blooming coffee.
Exactly. And then you're also kind of like cleaning all of the teacups and stuff like that and getting everything ready. And also like exactly like warming everything up.
Mm-hmm.
And so you can see like you just kind of spill like the whole time. And
right.
It just feels really good to like have something that's really messy, but also kind of has like all these different layers to it and things to enjoy.
Yep. And the messiness is kind of like a symbolic thing too. Yeah.
Exactly. Kind of like a lot of these things are kind of messages, you know, like how the tea is brewed, and like I would love to like deeply understand all of kind of like all the symbolism. I've heard many different expressions or ideas of it.
Yeah.
So yeah, but it's fun. I remember we were both in Colorado at the same time when you were in college, and I was starting to learn tea and stuff like that. And that was a really fun season. I think you were definitely one of the first people I was showing the tea ceremony to as I was learning. And
yeah,
it was definitely a lot of fun.
Just to describe it a little bit more, like this was a place called Kucha, which was on Pearl Street in Boulder, Colorado, which is like their main downtown area. And it's kind of like a bustling shopping center, and there's all kinds of tourists and college students kind of going everywhere. But then you would step into this like dark kind of cave-like space that was Kucha.
Yeah.
And it
all
was
like lamplit, right?
Yeah, it was just like very cozy. And you could go in the back, and they had like that classic like seat, like cushions that you would sit on the floor with, and then the low tables, and then these trays often set up. But it was like this little like haven from the chaos of Boulder. Like you just went in there, and I'm pretty sure they'd had like cool like Asian music or something playing.
Yeah,
like, it was like kind of a spa.
Mm-hmm.
And it was just this like unbelievable, and also smelled unreal in there. Mm-hmm. Like you go in there, and there's like literally 1,000 different kinds of tea, and it just is like this aroma that just hits you like a brick wall. And it was like a really, really sweet space. Yeah, they had the little waterfall going, and
yeah, especially like when I was when I had moved to Colorado, I didn't have any friends, and so I would just go there and I just felt safe there.
What's going on here?
So now we're gonna warm our hands with it, basically.
Okay.
So you roll it back and forth. These are like the smeller cups,
Okay.
and you put it right up to your nose.
Sweet potato.
And you try it. I know, sweet potato. It's kind
Yeah.
of weird.
Yeah.
You take another. It just gets sweeter every time you smell it, which is sweet.
Yep.
All right, and then what I like to do is when I take my first sip, I like to, we'll do a simple cheers.
Cheers.
And I like to just close my eyes for a second and ask myself the question, where am I? And just like use my imagination to put myself in a scene.
I don't know why, but I'm getting coastal vibes.
No way. I was also thinking I'm on the beach in the sun.
Yeah, I kind of got like Massachusetts, like New England beach. I don't know why, but
what I like about this and what I like in a good cup of tea is you kind of want like the yin yang, like the balance of both bitter and sweet. And so when you're trying to make tea, every steeping is kind of this attempt to make it perfectly sweet and perfectly bitter. Because obviously if it's too bitter, it's overpowering, but sweet's kind of like underbrewed, like it's just like it's not full.
Doesn't have character.
Which I also think is kind of beautiful, kind of like what bitterness does to our lives and like what we end up being thankful for, of like what either growth happened from it or anything. But bitterness and
so
tea
we each get one of these.
Yeah,
great.
Bloop bloop bloop.
And yeah, what's up with the upside down? You got two cups. You got like the tall upside down one, and then you bloop 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 it into the bigger one. Is that like what?
I don't know.
Does it have a function, or is that just like for fun?
Well, one of the things I will say is that I really I like tea that I can drink immediately. Have you ever been given a beverage before where like you literally can't drink it for 15 minutes because it's so
pretty
hot?
much anytime you get like a drip coffee.
Yeah, exactly. I like stuff that you can drink immediately.
Yeah.
And what I really like is obviously you start with boiling water.
Yep.
And then by the time it goes from the kettle to the gaiwan to the pitcher to the first cups and then to the second, basically every time you pour it into a different vessel, it loses about 10 degrees Fahrenheit of temperature.
Right.
Like, you know, when we do that, when you like pour something into a new mug to like lower the temperature because it has to disperse the heat.
Yep.
So I love that you can work with boiling water, and then just because you're putting it through so many different things, you can instantly drink it, and it's perfect.
Yeah, it's part of the function of the whole thing.
Yeah. And so obviously these ones are also just good for smelling and stuff like that because your nose fits right into it.
Yeah.
So so this is a tea from Nepal that I found in Kathmandu from a nice man that is in like the market. Cool. And I found him there, and then I had a couple of friends that went there a couple of years later, and I was like, find this man and this shop. And they did.
Was he in like that kind of downtown, like super like shopping center?
A little off the beaten path of it, but yes.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I've been there too.
Yeah, and so it's just his mom's farm.
Yeah.
And so he like has to commute like I think like 9 hours, he said, to like get to where he sells it.
Wow.
So he showed me a photo of his mom plucking tea, which is cool.
That's so cool.
Yeah. So
dang. Okay, cool. So that's round one.
So that's round one.
The other question I had about Gong Fu is, or something I think is interesting about it is like it's like a whole thing you can become trained in. And there's like Gong Fu ceremony masters. That's basically like a PhD in tea ceremonies.
Yeah.
How does that whole system work?
So they're definitely like in the Chinese tea ceremony world, it's a little bit more accessible, kind of like anyone can make tea. You know, it's messy. You can kind of work with it. Like it's very flexible, very forgiving.
Yeah.
But then if you take a boat to Japan and you do their tea ceremony, that's when you just like cannot mess around. Like it is taken so seriously.
Yeah.
And so, that's where like I remember we had some friends that were doing a Japanese tea ceremony in a botanical garden in Denver.
Yeah.
And they were talking with this woman, and she's like, I've been doing this for 40 years and I'm still not a tea master. She's like, but one day I will be a tea master. Like, it's just like, it sounds like it's just from
She's
like
been
some kind of
grinding
anime
for
movie.
forever.
And so they like, part of it is the culture of excellence that Japan has.
Yeah.
What's really cool is like every tea, like, how do I say this? Like every culture that has tea, normally the way they prepare the tea and the way that the tea works represents the culture.
Mm-hmm.
Like it kind of like says a lot about who they are, kind of thing.
Yep.
Like for example, like how the tea ceremony is, let's say in England, like with all of like the English tea and like the high tea hour and stuff with all of the pastries and all of the order and all the like, it's a lot of kind of like it was reserved for royalty at one point. And so
Right.
kind of it was like the fanciest people were having tea, and then it kind of got to the common people. But like, you know, the pinky up and all those different things, it's kind of like you just associate like a cup of tea, like very proper.
Yeah.
And so then when you go to Japan, it's all about like, you've got to do this perfect. And like, until you get to that point, like it's not good enough.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, people will just train forever for like this tea ceremony that takes about 4 hours to go through.
Is it a matcha thing or what?
It's with matcha.
Okay.
And yeah, basically it's a 4-hour ceremony that has all of these things. Like some of it involves tea, but like everything about the room has to be perfect. And like the garden outside of the room has to be perfect. And like the garden has to be laid out in a way that brings this thing and kind of like suggests this kind of feeling and stuff like that.
That's
and then when people come into the room,
insane.
like there's movements, there's ways to sit. The way that you serve the tea is like critical. The way
Yeah.
that you receive the tea and drink the tea is critical.
Right.
The dress has to be a certain, like everything down to every detail is perfect.
Yeah. There's such a beauty to that to me. Like it's a little bit much for sure, but there's like, it's just refreshing to see like people take something so seriously these days.
Yeah.
Because I think everyone like with just like how social media is and just the distraction that people have, like it almost demands you to be like unbelievably present to something. And just that level of like artistry and attention to detail, I think is increasingly rare for humans. And it just feels like such a beautiful thing that's preserved in tea.
Totally. Well, and especially something like that, like tea and hospitality, to like be an expert in tea means that you're serving people. Right. So it's kind of like if you're a tea master, that means like you're giving the best experience possible to someone else as well.
Yep.
Which is sick.
It's super good. I'm happy to keep bouncing back to tea as a topic as often as you like, and I want you to continue explaining
I'll just keep
things.
making this for you.
Well, as things change and as you're noticing different flavors develop, please keep updating. But I would love to transition into, because I think that idea of like service and hospitality transitions really well into some of the stuff I'd really love to talk with you about, which like a lot of the topic that you and I both write about is about friendship and connection and community. And that just seems to be a common pain point for a lot of people in the world that we live in, which has become hyper digitalized, hyper globalized, hyper social mediaized, and people just struggle with that. But I just see you as someone who is a bit of an outlier in the world as far as like community goes and friendship goes. So I would love to hear I honestly think to start with a little background, it would be helpful for you to share like what has been like your lowest point with that, of feeling like the most isolated, the most alone, and the least capable of building connection. And then if you could share like some of the most, where you've seen like the greatest source of that stuff come from in your life too. That might be like a really broad topic to start with, but I think it would help paint a picture a little bit of like where you've come to pick up some of these things.
Yeah, I would say the low points would definitely be, I probably had my deepest low where it was like the first time I had ever considered like, oh, do I have depression, or like, I don't know, just an alarming kind of like, oh, I'm not well right now. Was, I think it was maybe last summer or 2 summers ago. It was my first time working remote, so not with people, and I was in a basement in Canada, so like in the middle of farmland and stuff like that. And most of my job was just kind of like occasionally joining Zoom calls and stuff like that, but just doing work online and stuff like that. And then I think probably only once a day was I like outside just to like touch grass for a little bit. But like most of the time was just like trying to learn a new job. And that was just really difficult because I think I just realized how so much of my sense of even who I am comes from the people around me and stuff like that. Like, I feel like I've never been like a deeply, like if I'm by myself, I'm at my best kind of thing, which has been like a topic that I've wanted to look into more. But I think that season just was telling to me of, oh, okay, like I really do wither if I'm not like being known by people, being around people. And so I just think that was like a lot of clarity and was painful as well. It was just kind of like having to wait that out. And it didn't last forever, but I think that was the first season where I was like, oh, I think I might actually be depressed. I would say seasons where it's been the fullest, I would say any season where I feel like I'm in my gifting of hospitality, I feel like I'm at my best. Like I think I really love creating spaces where people feel welcome, welcome to be, welcome to enjoy, welcome to connect with other people. So probably I would say if I'm in my own house and I can use my own house as a place to bless people, either cooking or serving or tea or early mornings, all those different things, I feel like I don't know, it just feels like a house and a kitchen feels like an extension of me. So I feel like when I don't have that, it's always so different.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
And for those of you who don't know, so I'm on Substack and I've been writing on Substack for a little while, and Josh has also within the last year or so joined Substack.
Your fault.
Which is I love pressuring people to get on Substack because I think it's the best. But so Josh has this crazy thing in his life where he just referenced it. It's called early morning, where sometimes up to 30 or 40 people will show up at his not excessively large house at 4:30 in the morning or something, 5 in the morning, something like that, and spend a few hours kind of in like, the best way you could say it is like community solitude. Like
no one's talking to each other.
Everyone's like sitting in a room silently, either in prayer or journaling or reading or contemplating. But like literally sometimes it's 40 people packed into a house doing that with no words. And it's a very unique way of spending time that I have really only ever heard of like Quakers doing.
Oh my gosh.
People from like this ancient thing. And this was just a very organic thing that happened. And so Josh wrote a Substack that was like really beautifully and poetically sort of told the story of these early mornings. But just if you could give us like a Spark Notes version for people who haven't discovered you yet on Substack, what is kind of the origin of that and what does it look like now?
So I was having a conversation in 2017 with a friend of mine that I was kind of like his mentor in that season, which I was probably 19 years old. So I had a lot of things I hadn't figured out, but what I could offer, I was offering. And his name was Ethan, and we were both surfers, and we were talking about the absolute bliss of like the first light in the morning, paddling out and going surfing. There was just nothing better. And we were talking about how much easier it is when you have your friends waiting for you outside. Like when you wake up in the morning, like you can't just be like, oh, like another 5 minutes, another 10 minutes. Like you've got a solid time where you agreed with your friends to show up and go surfing.
Right.
And so basically what happened was during that conversation, we switched to a conversation talking about our like devotional times in the morning where we would pray, read scripture, journal, stuff like that. And so we were talking about the same time of day and we were both just like, bro, it's impossible. Like I set my alarm. I've tried, I've wanted to do this for years. I feel like I really need it. Like I need that time. But we both were just kind of like, dude, I just can't do it. It's just, I'm so tired in the morning. I can't wake up. And like this inner tension in me started to build of like, wait, this is the same time of day And one feels actually impossible, and one feels like the best thing I've ever done.
Right.
And I was like, I can understand the benefits of waking up at that early and having that kind of time before I start my day. Like I could tell someone easily, but I couldn't actually do it.
Mm-hmm.
And so a thought popped into my head. I was like, Ethan, what if we went surfing, but before that, just did it together? Like, what if you came over and like I made some coffee and stuff like that? And by the time I had said it, I was like, frick, like I need to do this. Like I should just like I don't know. I was just getting excited about it.
Yeah.
And he was like, "Nah, man, I'll see you out in the water." And it just was not down.
You.
It was not down. But I was so like convicted at this point that I should do it that I'm pretty sure the next conversation I had was with 2 other friends that was like just down the hall.
Yeah.
And I was like, guys, do you want to come over at 5 a.m. and we'll just like read scripture and like journal and just drink coffee and do nothing. And they were like, sure, sounds good. 5 a.m. Yeah, why not? And so, yeah, basically I didn't go surfing that day. What's fun is Ethan he eventually joined us. Which is great. We got him.
Smoking.
Yeah, but basically it just began these mornings where like we did one morning and then we just kind of debriefed it and everyone was like, yeah, I feel super awake and I've been looking to do this kind of time, but it's really hard to do on my own.
Yeah.
So the theme kind of was like, hey, I really think this kind of time is really important. And I feel like it's way too hard to do it by myself. And I'm doing it with these people and we're not even interacting, but I love it. And I'm doing something that before felt impossible. Mm-hmm. And I just remember like reading a book for like 45 minutes straight. And then I was journaling for 45 minutes straight. And I think I read the scripture for another 30 minutes and I finished and I was like, I don't think I've done something like that with that kind of focus in years.
Yeah.
In years, it just was so refreshing and it felt like so powerful. Mm-hmm. And so, yeah, we just did it the next morning and we did it for about 3.5 years straight after that.
Well, what do you mean by 3.5 years straight? Is this every day? Is this every morning?
Yeah, it was every day, Monday through Friday. And I started inviting people at 5:30.
Yeah.
And then we would finish and be like, that wasn't enough time. So then we would do 5. And then we'd finish at 7 and be like, oh my gosh, that was not enough time. Like, I feel like I just got started.
Yeah.
So then we started doing 4:30s and 4:30s locked in. Like, that felt like the time of day.
Yep.
Like, which it's practically night.
Yeah.
Like it's not morning. Like it's nighttime at 4:30. And so I would wake up at like 4:15. I would start the coffee and I would just open the door and there's just all these people waiting outside my house.
Yeah.
And sometimes there was 5 and sometimes there was 25 and sometimes there was 30. And we needed a bigger house eventually. So we got a bigger house for it. And so, yeah, it just was such a fun expression of community where we were all doing something together that felt impossible before. Yeah. And we were all experiencing like life change from it. Yeah. And then just connected over it. Yeah. And for me, being the host, I just loved getting to be the inviter and the coffee maker and stuff.
And to add a little context to this to make sense too, like Josh lives in Mexico, right? And he lives very close to a YWAM base, which is a missions organization. He used to be on staff with them, has been closely involved since 2016? Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so because of the proximity to this YWAM base, there is constantly people from literally all over the world cycling through, doing 3-month programs, 6-month programs, staying there for multiple years on end on staff. And so a lot of the people that are coming are mostly connected to this organization. And sometimes there are other people that are just live locally and are just, part of the community. But the cool part about this is, when there's 25 people showing up, a lot of the times there's people from Switzerland, from Venezuela, from Colombia, from all over Mexico, from the US, from Canada. Like, it's just like this crazy...
you got like 10 countries in a room at all times.
You got just some insane representation. And it's... honestly, I think your proximity to that base is a lot of the reason something like that could happen. Mm-hmm. Which I think I think when I first heard about this, I'm like, that just happens because you're close to a YWAM base. But then you told me about it and we started doing it in Colorado.
Yeah, I was going to ask what your experience was with it.
Yeah, and ours was less short-lived. Like Josh has been doing it, or was more short-lived. Josh has been doing it literally consistently since 2017. Which, yeah, that's 8 years now, which is insane. But when he told us what was happening, we were kind of in disbelief, but he came and visited Colorado, and he was basically like, I'm going to do this with you guys. You can wake up with me or not. But we started waking up with him, and it was almost the exact same thing. I was a college student at a university in Colorado, and it was at first just me and Josh. And then it was me and both of my brothers and maybe some of our friends. And yeah,
Ryan and Eric.
I would say it was probably 4 or 5 months for us, where it was like kind of Monday through Friday, similar.
Still pretty wild.
Yeah. And we would wake up at 4:30.
Didn't you guys go to the roof to watch the sunset or the sunrise?
Yeah, we would wake up and we would like chill and have a fire going, have some coffee going. We would sometimes literally have 30 people show up at 4:30 in the morning.
And they all had to drive.
Yeah, people were driving. It's not like they were walking across the street from a YWAM base. Like people were driving sometimes an hour from Fort Collins to like come and join us. And yeah, we would be in the dark for a while. And then when the sun started rising, like 10 of us would go like sit on our roof in this like suburban neighborhood. And
it sounds so cool and angsty.
And just watch the sunrise. It was like such a vibey time. And also like, you know, just the fact that it's happening is really insane, but the impact that it has when you're, you know, 23, 22, 21 years old to sit in the company of a bunch of people and just be present to God, to a piece of scripture, to
no one's on their phones.
Yeah. Right? Like, it's just it's like this miraculous thing. And I just don't think you can really you can't really overhype how much of an impact that has on your soul and your mind and your body. Deeply impactful time for me. And every once in a while I'll put one of those together. I live in Hawaii now, and I'll put one of these early mornings together. But it's much more difficult to rally people, at least just in this stage of life for me. But Josh has continued to have like insane success and just continue to grow in this like beautiful expression of hospitality that is a 4:30 a.m. alarm when you have a newborn child that's only 9 months old, and you're like juggling all that, and you're already sleep deprived, and you're still waking up 5 days a week at 4:30 to host a bunch of people. It's crazy. Yeah. Like I don't know. The more details you ever share about it, the more you're like, what the actual heck has happened?
Yeah,
it almost felt like more of like a movement. It's not like you had this like big marketing campaign and you like somehow coerced a bunch of people into it. Like, especially the wake up thing. It's like, that is such a high barrier to come. And a lot of people's experience, including mine, is that like sometimes you'll do like a movie night or something where you're trying to cook food for people. And it's like, people are flaky and it's hard to get people to show up for things. And that's like a very consistent thing I've seen just across my own frustrations and other people's frustrations with friendship, is like, even just in individual friendships, a lot of times there's a lot of like desire for connection, and yet it feels hard to, people just feel like they really struggle to get the same reciprocated interest back.
Yeah.
And here we have a story where there's like some intention of like, I want to do hospitality, but there was almost this magnetism that occurred where it was just all of a sudden it had a life of its own. And I've seen that happen with a few other gatherings, and I think it can even happen in individual friendships too. So I'm just curious, like reflecting back on that, and even just currently on how it works. What are sort of the relationship lessons or community lessons you've taken from just this whole crazy thing that's happened?
Yeah. Well, I think you can never underestimate the power of invitation. I just think like being personally invited to something versus, I don't know, social media or a text message, even just, I don't know, just someone personally asking you to go do something with them is always exciting.
And that's how you invite people in?
Yeah, so technically I have to restart early mornings every 3 months. So it's not like the same group for years.
Right.
Like there's it's always kind of had to restart.
Right.
Most of that's because with YWAM, most of the students that participate are only here for a few months.
Right.
I think it's crazy that they come because their days are so full on.
Yeah.
Like they're in class, they have work duties, they're in service projects and stuff. So like they have really long days, and somehow they also wake up at 4:15 and come
to
early mornings.
That's crazy.
I've never announced it before. Like I don't go in front of a group of people and tell them the benefits of waking up early and stuff like that. It just starts normally with 1 or 2 people, and I just tell them, hey, I have a tradition of waking up in the morning, and I think honestly a big thing is coffee as well. If there's going to be coffee, people are down.
Yeah, true.
And yeah, all I say is, hey, do you want to wake up early and do quiet time together?
Yeah.
And I don't know. People come and they sit wherever they want. They have their time, and it's just I don't know what it is about like silently doing something together, but like you just have a sense of closeness with people. Like even though you're not talking and moving, and I almost feel like because you're not, there's no facilitated conversation. There's no thing. I just feel like it almost I don't know. It just feels bonding to go do something together like that. So.
Yep.
I would say like after that, it all just becomes word of mouth, and so someone loves it, and they're just like, hey, there's this place where they wake up early, and there's always like as much coffee as you want, and so people are like, great, I'm there.
Yeah.
And so I think that's really special. I also just think like living a life. Living a life, I don't know, things that are healthy, things that are desirable in general, and then just inviting people into it.
Right.
I think of like for you for surfing or making a good meal or a movie night or all those different things. I think like finding stuff that genuinely gives you life, and then instead of how hard it can be to do it on your own, I'm like probably there's other people that would be interested as well in joining. So I don't know. I don't know if that helps.
No,
answer some of
totally.
it.
I think to me, what I see too is like there's just a sense that you're going somewhere. And I think
I like that.
with relationship, I think in a blog post I wrote about this, or maybe it was a podcast or something, but I kind of have come to realize that there's sort of like two sides to relationship. There's like face-to-face relationship that are sort of mutual interest in the other person, right? And they form because there's an interest in the other, and they face one another, and they're inquisitive of one another, and the relationship is about the other person. And then there's also like side-by-side relationships where like both people are trying to go in a similar direction. They're on parallel lines.
Yeah, they have some kind of like task to do together.
Like CrossFit communities or religious, spiritual communities, or
we're just going fishing together.
Music.
Yeah, like trying to fish.
Yeah, they're like, yeah, totally. When there's a shared interest and there's like a journey that both people are trying to go on together, that can be super bonding. And I don't think there's necessarily like a I think there's a place for the face-to-face, and I think there's a place for the side-by-side. And I think the best relationships are able to like kind of dynamically switch between the two when the timing is right. But I think what I see in early morning is like there's just a compelling vision for life that you offer someone. And I think most people deep down know that they want it and know that they, like you, lack the power to do it on their own. And yeah, I just think like that's sort of, to me, what gives it a life of its own in a lot of ways is just, it's just compelling, and it's also like, no one's really ever done it or heard, like, not that I know of, other than like the Quakers in like the 1800s. Monks. And even still, they probably just still do stuff like that. But the fact that it takes on a life of its own and seems to always have momentum no matter what season there is. I don't know. And so I think like when I look at people who move to a new town and, like you have a pretty unique scenario where you have kind of built-in community with YWAM right here. But I think like that same principle applies when you narrow it down to like a small town, like someone maybe moved to a small town in Texas, or they're new in some place, and it's not like there's this bustling community that they can sort of just drift behind. It's like, I think people connect really deeply when there's like a shared direction that people are going. And I think that's why a lot of times when people struggle and they're like, I don't know how to make new friends or where to go to meet new people, the biggest thing I usually encourage people to do is like go find a gym or like some sort of like fitness community, because
someone's going somewhere.
Yeah, that's like the lowest hanging fruit of like, there's always going to be people that are trying to better themselves like that, and you're just going to connect with people that way. Because otherwise it's like, yeah, you can go to parties and you can just go out on the town, go to coffee shops, and those are perfectly fine places to meet people. And you totally
may not get you face to face though.
Right. But like when you're on a shared journey with someone, there is just an insane amount of bonding, surface area to connect over, and I think that the cool thing too is like there's a source from that within the self, that you can start that yourself. And sometimes when the problem is I don't have community, the solution can be I need to decide what I want in my life and go after it and find the other people that are going after it. Does that make sense?
That sounds deep. I might take a while to dissect or think about that in my brain. Yeah, I think I think proximity just helps.
Mm-hmm.
Like whenever you're just going to be in the same room as people, the closer you are to them, the more you're going to connect with them.
Yep.
I know it sounds like so basic, but I feel like I've always loved experiencing when I'm like kind of forced to be in a moment with other people. I don't know whether that's like during a trip or a work project or something like that, where all of a sudden, like let's say just a random example, you're assigned to do a paint, like you're painting a room, and there's another person that joins you. It's kind of like you guys are just bound to find you guys are bound to have a conversation. You guys are like even sitting on a chairlift with someone, like just kind of being stuck somewhere. It's almost like how do you intentionally get stuck with people somewhere?
Yep.
I feel like that's where the best stuff comes from, because if it's too face to face, like the point is to connect. Like I get really nervous when I'm just supposed to connect and like have a deep talk with someone over coffee instantly.
Right.
But if we're doing something together, I feel like it's just much more helpful.
So true.
I think especially for guys, I feel like girls can be a little different. They're like just ready to talk story and stuff like that. I feel like guys, like what's the adventure we're going to go do together?
Yep.
And so even during like my really depressing season in Canada, like one of the highlights was I befriended my like the closest neighbor in our farming community. His name was Barry, and he's a guy in his probably 60s or like mid 60s, farmer, mustache, ponytail,
legend.
And especially during my season, I didn't have many people. I was like, I just need to like be around people, and so I just was like, hey, can I come over?
Right.
And like I hadn't done stuff like that since I was like, since we were kids, like being like, can you play?
Yeah.
And I felt like that with Barry. I was just like, hey, can you play? Like, can I come over? It's like it's not like
60-year-old dude.
And I feel like it taught me like, I feel like later in our 20s and stuff, it's all about like, you kind of got to like make it fun.
Yeah.
And like, I got to like pose it so that it's worth going to do.
Right.
And I feel like lowering the standard of what it takes to just go be with people and do something.
Yeah.
So I feel like what I like about early mornings is like it's so basic. It's like all I do is make coffee and open a door.
Yep.
But it's like it's time together where you're just like shoulder to shoulder.
Yep.
So I don't know, different expressions like that have just like, I don't know. Do you have examples in your life of when you just randomly got to be with people and how friendship started from it, or community was just like, we're all going to do the same thing?
Yeah. Well, I definitely think like the choices you make on where to live and what to do with your life really affect it. Mm-hmm. Like I think after I finished college, I realized that like the community that I wanted was not really the community that I had, because a lot of the people that I was really tight with were amazing people, but I sort of had a desire to live a bit of a unconventional life and do something kind of different, not really like, graduate school, find the best job I can, start saving to buy a house, have kids. Like that sort of line was not really what excited me.
You weren't sold on it.
Right. And I also was like single, and I was like, how do I find community and also girls that are like the type of people that I want to be around? And that's kind of what brought me to do Surfing the Nations, which was just like that volunteer work that I did in Hawaii for a while. Was I just found this organization that was like adventurous, that had a servant mindset, that wanted to bring goodness into the world, but also like loved surfing, loved the outdoors. And I just like intentionally was like, I'm going to just pause my life, start fundraising so that I have enough money to like just live off of for a little while, and just go out there, just because I know that that's going to put me in the position that I want to be around the people that I want. Mm-hmm. And yeah, so I think there's like those really like broad stroke intentional things. But then I think like there's also very micro choices that you can make. Like now that I live in Hawaii, I also work from home. And a lot of the time it's like the same touch grass principle applies. Like I could sit in my home and just work from there because it's like the fastest Wi-Fi is there. I don't have to spend money on coffee. Like I can just kind of do my thing. Mm-hmm. But a lot of times I will intentionally be like, just think of what can I do to put myself in a position where I can connect with someone and have an opportunity to make a new friend or connect with someone. Yeah. And because of that, I love working from coffee shops. Like I think coffee shops.
Fun question. Like, what can I do to get close to people and just like have the opportunity to meet someone in a way that's
And I think
organic.
it can be very calculated, like going to a coffee shop where you think there's a high likelihood of bumping into a neighbor or someone you're already friends with. But I also think you can get like kind of wacky with it and be like, I'm just going to go for a drive and see if there's a place. Like, I don't know. I think you can make it a bit of adventure because, yeah, it's so easy to go on an adventure on your phone and like just scroll for forever and just let that suck up your whole life. And the problem with that is like you're not going to build real connection with people. And I think it just helps to be like, I could be here and like be on an internet adventure, or I could just choose to go be in the analog world and put myself in a position
much harder
where like anything could happen, where I could smell a flower, where I could like exist in the real world.
Yeah. Well, and I feel like it's worth practice. Like I feel like if we want to be people 20 years from now that are really good at making friends and connecting and being sources of like, I don't know, inner peace to people, like just being around people, having people have a sense that they're cared for and loved, like just, I don't know, being a good person in that sense. I feel like, like the internet could take most of your time and most of your energy and stuff like that, which I'm sure is only going to be more difficult in the future. And so, like, how are you just getting around people more, especially for those who work from home? It's like, you really have to fight for it and like choose it and get out of your comfort zone.
I'm with you. Another microcosm I think of this connection thing. Yeah, like I think we're talking really broad of like, well, I like the idea of like, what are the broad things you can do, like life decisions you can choose to like live in a city or move somewhere, get a new job that connects you. Like there's those big things. And then there's the little things, like if I have 3 hours and I have the choice between working from my house or a coffee shop, what am I doing? I think that's cool. And I think another one of those small things that has like a massive impact on like your ability to connect with people is honestly just like your intention going into conversation with people. A lot of the questions I get with my Substack too is like, how do I hang out with people in a way that is connecting? Because I think a lot of people, like one person voiced that they overshare and they feel like they're just talking too much and they're sharing too much. Other people feel like they're feel a bit of resentment and bitterness because they often feel like they're the only one asking questions. And the other person's like listening the whole time. But I would say like you're someone who just is a very well equipped conversationalist. And I typically find myself really enjoying the balance of like how much I'm talking versus you when we're having a conversation. And I think other people,
which we've worked on thanks to your.
That's true. I've suggested some of that.
You have had some helpful suggestions.
Yeah. But like something I love too with you is you're amazing at picking up conversations with strangers, which is another, like I would say you're much better at that than I am. And that's another thing that I think is a really amazing tool to have in your belt if you're wanting to make new friends and start new community. I guess so. In all this, I'm curious if you would have any like things that you've learned that are kind of your core wisdom on what you kind of always fall back on when you're like, I am in a season of life where I want to build new connections and meet new people.
Yeah, I feel like meeting new people and like making friends. Right now, there's a very like marketplace value to it that I feel like people talk about, like how important it is to like make connections and do networking and stuff. So like the art of conversation is like normally to the means of like, so I can find new clients or so that I can, and I feel like I don't hear a lot of stuff just for like the sake of deep connection. It's mostly kind of like all the gurus talking about like how to, move your business forward and stuff. You just got to be like an expert networker and be friends with everyone.
Right. Or it's like a self-improvement thing where it's like you're the sum of all the people you surround yourself with. So if you want to get better as a person, find better people.
Totally. And so then it kind of becomes like you're choosing people just on like, well, what would they do for my life? Or like, how could they benefit me?
Yeah.
So I feel like kind of the rudimentary things that I feel like has just been helpful in my life. And I would say ties into early morning is like I've just spent a lot of time considering like the value of people, like the value of like my own life, like how God feels about me, how God feels about other people. And I feel like, especially a couple of years ago, I kind of had this whole journey of like asking the question, what is the value of a person to God? Like, are we precious? Are we worth it? Like all those different things, like what value does a person have? And I feel like especially my time in missions is just kind of like, I don't know, appreciating and having fun with going off the beaten path for someone. So like, you know, even the photo that we have over here of Don Carlos from like the middle of the mountains of Nayarit, Mexico, like he's a hermit that lives all by himself. Yeah, John's showing the photo right now in the video. And so like, I feel like he's someone that you're not going to meet, you know, unless you kind of go the distance and stuff. And so I feel like the idea of going the distance for someone, of being intentional, it's not just like so you can get something. Like I feel like I've learned over time, just like that's part of what life is about. It's just like going and loving people and going and showing up for people. And you know, we all have senses of, you know, do I matter? Am I valuable? Am I loved? And so I feel like even in the topic of making friends and stuff, I just feel like the core thing of like people are worth it. People are worth being talked to and cared about and asked questions and stuff and celebrated. Like, you know, the people you meet at the grocery store that are checking your bags and stuff, and how many times like circular conversations, or just, I don't know, people that are just doing normal jobs that are easily looked over. I feel like, you know, from my time of like looking at the life of Jesus and looking at like what life is about, connecting with people and showing them that they have value, I feel like is a worthwhile journey. And so I feel like that's kind of maybe been some of my background of like why I love to talk to people. Is I just feel like every day when I get to talk to someone, it's an opportunity to show them that they're noticeable. Because you know, so many times people just walk past, and a lot of people feel walked past, you know, or just kind of like that they're not. And so I feel like I've loved that. And so when I'm talking to someone, I feel like kind of like, I don't know, the step one for me, and this is like so basic, it feels goofy to say, but I love getting people's names, especially when names are not necessary to know. Like, I don't know, we interact with so many people when we don't get their names, just in daily life and stuff. And I love to over ask for people's names. Because I feel like as soon as you get someone's name, you understand it. Like I don't know, you just see them more, you perceive them more. Like,
and it tells the person like, hey, this is more than just like an interaction. Like it says, I have an intention of knowing you.
Yeah, of course. And I feel like, you know, and it's not in a weird way. Like it's okay to just know someone's name. It doesn't feel like too deep or too intrusive.
Yeah.
And so I love getting people's names. And so if someone's serving breakfast and stuff like that, I just love to ask their names. And a lot of times people have really interesting names or beautiful names, or I don't know, even there's connections in that are always fun, especially if you're in different countries, because you're like, you know, you can ask, what does it mean? Or do you like your name? Or I don't know, just different stuff like that.
Yeah.
I would just say the second thing is just asking someone genuinely, like, how has your day gone? Or like, you know, if someone's working, like, what's your shift today? I just love to like get some context on how their day is going without just saying, how are you? Good. How are you? Good. I love to kind of like ask something that's a bit more like, no, I actually want to hear how your day's going. And so like asking, instead of how's, you know, like, how are you? I don't know, just saying, you know, something that's actually pertaining to how their day's going or what's going on in their life.
Yeah.
And instead of like, I don't know, I just feel like it's always exhausting. Like, have you ever, there's some parts of even the US where like, when you walk past someone and you say hi, they say, how are you? But it's part of the greeting. It's not even a question.
Right.
Have you experienced that before?
Oh, yeah.
Where you're like, do I say good? Do I actually answer them? Like, sometimes you're not even sure if you should respond or if that's just part of them walking past you and saying hi.
Right.
Have you seen that?
Oh, yeah, 100%. I think that's why most people assume just to say good when someone says, how's it going?
Yeah. Yeah.
It's like most people assume this person doesn't care about it.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. And so I just feel like there's so many things about someone's day. I love to compliment people. I just feel like that's also a great thing. Like there's something in every person you meet that's complimentable.
Yeah.
Or something to notice and point out. And so I love, you know, dude, that's a sick watch. Or like, hey, I love your shoes. Or I don't know. There's been sometimes like it's not always appropriate or it's not always like the right time, but I just think it's so sweet to compliment people.
Yeah.
And then you can ask another question after, or it's just someone feels noticed, and I feel like that's meaningful too.
Yeah. To me, like the layer underneath all this, though, that feels like it informs every like little strategy you have, is just that like self-giving love And I honestly think for people who struggle with community, that's like the biggest thing. Like I just think there's like a spiritual foundation that really needs to be in place for connection to happen. Because there's this weird thing where like when you exist and like you want to show up in the world to bring goodness into other people's lives and to bless other people, the byproduct of that is deep connection. And it's being a magnetic person. It's being a charismatic person that people want to be connected to.
Mm-hmm.
And the opposite is true when people can tell that you're really mostly self-interested, that you just want to have friends so that you can feel good, so that you can have that transactional sort of nature. Like weirdly, that like repels people. Whereas I really think like it's a super attractive thing to people to find people that are choosing people first, that are seeking their good first, that are asking, how can I bless this person? How can I make their life better today? Even if it's a total stranger.
Mm-hmm.
Like something I say a lot is like the least lonely people in this world are the people who like care to invite people first, because they're more worried about how lonely the other person might be than how they are feeling,
Well,
you know?
Which is also crazy because it also fixes your inner loneliness when you can be that friend to someone.
Right.
Which is really hard because I feel like a lot of people, they're like, well, how can I, give from a place that I don't have?
And that's a hard thing. That's where like I think the mental health crisis and smartphones pulling us away from our own hearts, our own spirituality. I think it's such a problem because it like kind of tears away that base. And we get disassociated from how we feel, or we get depressed from it because we're comparing ourselves to other. And I really just think a lot of problems just stem from that.
Yeah.
And I think so many things are healed and solved when there's this like, when we just have a moment of realizing like, oh, life is about like love. Life is about like, life is a story I'm living, and I can live it like passively and for myself, or I can live it actively and like seek good in the world.
Yeah.
And it's just like this weird thing where it's like when you seek good in the world and when you decide I want to bless other people, all of a sudden all those things that you longed for are just coming to you, you know?
Yeah. I think that's something that you taught me when I was in high school. I remember you saying that you were a freshman in college, and obviously you cared about finding friends and stuff like that. And I remember you were saying how ironic it was how many people that you were talking to had a sense of loneliness, or a sense that they didn't have any friends, and that they didn't have any community, and they didn't feel like anyone was tapping on the shoulder, inviting them like, hey, come to this party with me, or hey, I want to get to know you. Do you want to go out for coffee and stuff? And you said it was just so ironic because then there's a whole crowd of people walking past each other. And like, although it is the solution that they're all around each other, it's just like everyone's kind of waiting for this moment to be selected and to be like chosen and someone to be intentional with. But it's just ironic because like everyone's in the same boat. And so the only people who could fix it are the actual people who are also experiencing it themselves, because most of them are in the same boat.
Yep.
So I just remember thinking like, oh, like instead of being someone like that's just waiting, I think a lot of us, like our sense of community is kind of like, how often am I being invited to stuff? That is kind of like my sense of community, is how often is someone saying, hey, come to this thing, or hey, come to this thing. We normally are not thinking about what we're making or what we're inviting. But I feel like as hard as that is, sometimes kind of like you have to fight against this kind of ironic tragedy that like everyone's feeling lonely.
Yeah, everyone just wants to be invited when they don't realize that they have power to invite.
Exactly. And I think like each person, like I don't think they realize that their own friendship is a blessing to someone else. Like they're always thinking of like, just like the lack of it for themselves, but they're not thinking about the fact that like their friendship could mean the world to someone else.
Right.
And so like, because maybe they're just not thinking that other people are lonely. Like I think it's pretty typical that like if you look at like, let's say a group of friends and stuff like that, like you're normally not thinking or aware of the fact that people have a sense of inner loneliness, or a sense of like inner, like, yeah, I just feel like no one knows me.
Yeah.
But obviously they have a sense of their own like depraved experience of community.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? They're feeling the loneliness, but they just kind of assume, and I would say like this has been my story, is like I normally just have assumed that everyone's kind of got their ducks in a row in terms of friendships. And it's only until you kind of are like in smaller quarters with someone and they're sharing, and you're like, what? Like you seem like the most connected person. Like you seem like, how do you not have a sense that people know you? How do you not have a sense that you have like friendships?
Yep.
And I feel like that's happened way more than I expected, especially with people that like they're around people all the time. And it's the same with us. It's kind of like you can be around someone, but still feel, you can be around community all the time and still feel disconnected.
Yep.
And so I just feel like, changing that for me, like when you were explaining that when I was in high school, I feel like I started to realize that I could be someone else's friend. Not just, I don't have any friends, but like, oh, maybe I could be someone's friend. And I feel like it was after that where I started inviting people into stuff I was doing. Like even like, hey, do you want to go to the grocery store with me? I have to go anyways, but like, great to go with someone.
Right.
Or like, hey, I have to go do this drive, or I have to go do this thing. Like, do you want to come with me?
Yep.
I think because I realized that every time I was inviting someone, they enjoyed being included and being chosen.
Yep.
And so even though I didn't feel included and chosen all the time, I just started inviting.
Yep.
So maybe that's part of it.
Yeah, I think it's really underneath a lot of it. I think that's like people often focus on like tactics of like what's working, what's not. I've tried all these things, it's not working. But I think a lot of it is like a symptoms thing versus like deeper issue. And I think that deeper issue is often just like our own self-esteem, our own spiritual foundation and identity of like who we are. And like you said, like that idea that dawned on you of like, oh, like me just being friends with someone might like really be something they need. Like I could fill a hole in someone's life. Like I could be a solution to the pain that I'm feeling.
Totally.
Like
I actually could do something about that
for
someone else.
Yeah, and I just think that's like a really cool thing to learn, and I think it's true for every single human.
Yeah.
But the sad like lie that a lot of us believe, and like the hard thing with mental health and depression is like it's always the lie that like you're not valuable, that you're making someone's life worse, that no one wants to hear you, like no one wants you to be a part of their life, and like everyone's just isolated in their own silos believing that, while meanwhile it's like we are all the solution to each other's problem.
Yeah. I definitely have lots of memories of being around you and other people where they have affirmed the way that you were as a friend to them. Like I remember times where like friends of ours have cried, like let's say like during your bachelor party and stuff like that, where there's like a time of affirmation. But I mean, I've been around even in your life to see like times where someone's like, you just calling me every once in a while, like you may have thought that was just what you were doing, but on my side, in my world, in what I was going through, those calls meant so much to me. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like you didn't have to. We did not have this contract that we had to go do something together, or like you just did it out of like the free desire of connection.
Yeah.
And that may have been, and they'd say like that may have been small for you, but for me that was an anchor, was to feel like, oh, I have a friend.
Yeah.
I have someone checking in on me.
Yeah. That's an underrated thing too, just calling people.
Yeah.
Josh and I are both big on just calling people.
Yeah, it's a pastime.
Yeah. It's honestly, sometimes it's like a balm for me. Like I'll feel anxious and I'll be like, let's just call someone. Great.
Oh, totally. I mean, I've had times where I've called up a friend and I'm the one who called them, but talking to them, I was like,
I needed
this. Like I needed to connect with someone. How, like, you should put me in some of your moments when you call people and like why you do it. And like, I mean, it's interesting that you were saying anxious. I wasn't expecting that, but like, I don't know, you should just share like moments where you're like, dang, I should just call someone.
I think a lot of it's just days where I'm like working.
Because like could be scrolling or listening to music.
Oh, 100%. And I think I usually realize that. I'm like, I have things I could do with my time. I could play Fortnite by myself, which sometimes I do. I could keep working, or I could take a break and call one of my friends. And I don't know, I just feel like that's become such a like muscle reflex for me now. It often is just like, it comes from like, I've just spent too much time alone today, and connecting, whether it's me listening and like trying to encourage someone, or sharing something about my life and like having someone else listen to me, like just feels like something I need. And it's just it's so accessible. It's like, and I like to sometimes challenge myself to call friends that I like haven't connected with in a while, but are really good friends. Yeah. Just because like, I have my go-tos. I have like you and Jeff, my brothers. And then I have like, Natty, Davey. I have like kind of my inner circle of people I call. But sometimes it's really cool to just like be like, who have I been thinking about lately? Who's someone that like I just haven't connected with, and just call them out of the blue? Like it's just...
Okay, I have some questions. Okay, so like, do you ever text people beforehand to ask if they can call?
Absolutely not.
Okay.
And I'm a FaceTimer too. Sometimes I play FaceTime Roulette, where I'll scroll through my contacts with my eyes closed and I'll click on someone and I have to call them.
Okay, this is definitely a moment, like, especially FaceTime Roulette, where people would say, okay, I definitely do not want to do that.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't recommend that. That's more of like a sadistic thing or a masochistic thing.
Oh my gosh.
And I don't do it very often, but I've done it every once in a while.
Yeah. Okay, tell me about a time where you called someone that was like, you hadn't talked to them in years. Like, have you done that before where you're like, this is fringe?
Yeah, Jack Buckley.
You called Jack Buckley?
Yeah, and he'll call me too sometimes. It'll be
You're
like
kidding.
2 years since we've talked to each other.
He'll like copy the fringe call?
Yeah, he's like one of my good buddies. Like, honestly, we weren't even that close in high school, but he was a buddy from high school that I have not seen since high school, since 2013.
Oh my God.
But we like call each other every like year or so.
Oh my
And
God.
sometimes I'll just be like, it's time to call Jack. And I'll just hit Jack up and we'll talk for an hour. And he's just a great dude. And we've grown closer just over phone.
That's so sick. And like, do you have do you tell people you want to talk, or do you just ask it? Like, it sounds like it could just be awkward. Is
Sometimes
it ever
it is.
awkward, or how do you like?
Sometimes
How do you
it's,
help
like,
it to
somewhat
not
clear.
be awkward?
I don't know. I usually just choose people that I know will be like somewhat stoked that I'm calling them.
Okay.
I tend to not call people that like I'm not very clear on whether they like me or not.
All right.
You know?
Yeah. So it's people that like maybe at some point you've had like a great connection with, or and maybe it's just been a while.
Yeah.
And like, I just think that is something that people would think is weird, but I think in a lot of ways
so great.
is beautiful, because one of the things I've experienced, and even like reading The Anxious Generation and stuff, is like there's such a phantom sense of connection when you're on your phone and stuff like that, where you just kind of feel like you're connected with people.
Yep.
And like you're technically in a calling, like you could technically call or message most of these people instantly.
Yeah.
And so it's like you're very connected to them, but like actually calling them would be insane.
Yeah.
But I like that you put into practice of being like, no, I like actually need to connect with them. With The Anxious Generation, I just remember like people, the concept of ghosting and how new that is, and how like even though we like have all of these contacts and all these different things, when someone stops messaging you, or like when there's kind of been like a trail off of a conversation, it all of a sudden feels inaccessible.
Yeah.
Where like you're like, I don't know how to pick up the conversation again or stuff like that, where it's just like almost like fake in a sense. It's like a fake fear of like, oh well, the conversation went nowhere or something like that.
So real.
Or like I messaged this person and they never messaged me back, so like are we not cool anymore?
Totally.
And
That's
I just
so
feel like
relatable.
most of it's just not legit, but it feels like that.
Yeah. The amount that we think people want to hear from us is so much lower often than what it actually is. Like people often think, like, I don't know, even for me, I've just often surprised, like someone will do something that I consider to be showing or demonstrating that they're not that interested in relationship with me.
Mm-hmm.
And then like later I'll like be surprised after kind of putting myself on a limb again that like I was sort of wrong. And it was something more about them than it was about me that was why we didn't connect.
Yeah.
And I think people there's like a fragility, I think, of like our egos a little bit and our like sense of self-worth. When we get some rejection from someone, we're so sensitive to that we often like don't push through that.
Yeah.
And it makes sense. It's like, again, I think you have to have such a strong belief that you're bringing goodness into the world and into people's lives to like press through rejection to make sure someone's really rejecting you when they might have just been saying like it's not a good time, or they might have just been like, you know, you might have made a plan with them and they blew you off and forgot about it. And like a lot of people would just internalize that as like, this person clearly is not interested in a relationship with me.
Yeah.
When often it is really just more about something with them, that they're just chaotic and they're not good at following through, and they have social anxiety and they're scared of making new relationships.
Oh my gosh.
But we internalize all of it as like, I'm bad, this person doesn't want to hang out with me.
Yeah. And it's like you have a conversation 4 years later where they're like, honestly, I was just nervous. And you're like, you were just nervous?
Yes.
Like we
100%.
could have talked.
That's literally so much. Like literally, so people mistake social anxiety for I don't like you. That's a fact.
Whoa.
That's so real.
Yeah, of course, because
And
it's like they're actually really wanting to connect.
Totally.
But there's some riff, and it's kind of like, oh, this is a no-touch zone anymore.
So it's social anxiety, and it's also like poor calendar management. Like I think some people just don't know. Like some people just like it's normal to them to like make a plan with someone and then not go to it and then not tell them.
Mm-hmm.
Like some people just have such a low threshold for like courtesy in relationship and explaining things.
Mm-hmm.
And it comes off as very rude, and it is rude. Like it's just something like if you're going to make a plan with someone and you're going to be late or you're not going to go, like you need to communicate about that ahead of time. And so many people, more because of their own chaotic stuff and them not having great relational skills, they just drop the ball on that, and that's just normal.
And it's taken personally.
Yeah, and it's taken personally, and I just think that's one of the hard things is like so many people are going to wound you and hurt you because they're just very unthoughtful, even though they're great people and they're so worth connecting with. Like so many people just don't have amazing, like show up on time, show up interested, have good questions, like be punctual. Mm-hmm. People just don't have those skills. Mm-hmm. And they are skills. You know, it's not like an inherent thing to anyone that like some people are just inherently good and some people are inherently bad at it. It's like, I really think you can become good at those things.
Yeah.
And I think, yeah, those people are worth going after too, worth building relationships with. Like you totally have friends and I have friends and we know who they are. We're like, we have 100% been the pursuer, 100% been the initiator, and they almost never respond to it, but it almost like doesn't bother us because we don't take it personally and we just like hanging out with them so much that we're like, yeah, I'll just do the elbow work, and I'm not going to see you as like a super like gonna show up for me in my hour of need friend, but I value your friendship enough to just be the guy. Yeah,
and you kind of feel like you're just kind of glad to be around them and stuff like that, but you're like, I don't really know how they feel about me and stuff. And there have been some moments where like that type of friend has told me years in, like, you know, we're like my closest friend.
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh, what? Sorry, what? And you wasn't even so sure we were cool.
Yes. And you mean so much to them, but it's like it's just a them thing. It's not a you thing. It's like they're just not good at starting, you know?
Yeah. Another thing I think people experience is assuming that people's friendship circles are booked. Like that people are already kind of satisfied with where they are relationally.
Yep.
And I just feel like people just assume like, no, they don't need another person in their life. Like I would just be intruding and like, hey, like knock, 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 it's me. And like just like annoying or whatever. And I feel like I've always been surprised by how when I call someone, how many times they're like, hey, thanks so much for calling. Like that meant so much to me.
Right.
Like I was having a bad day or like I felt kind of alone and stuff like that. And I could have just been like, no, they're in the world. Like they're, you know, I would just be an annoying kind of like, why do they have to call or even just like they have all their friends and stuff like that. They don't need an extra person. And I feel like I would say most of the time, like that extra person being that conversation or you reaching out to them was actually really meaningful to them.
And I would say over the past 5 years, that assumption has like you can make that assumption 10,000% more confidently than you could have 5 years ago, just because of how freaking isolated and lonely our world is right now.
Yeah. It's like you can almost guarantee it that people are like, oh, I really am craving and lacking deep friendships.
Totally. Like, I just think it's so universal at this point that you can just almost safely assume most people would really be blessed. Their life would be significantly improved by having someone who really cares about that relationship with them.
Yeah.
You know? And I don't know. I think there's a lot of room for nuance in some of this conversation. We can pause for a sec. Go ahead. Yeah.
Hey, boo-boo.
Boo-boo.
How does Nap go?
Okay.
You want to just check that everything's still recording and whatever?
Oh, yeah. Can you see if it's recording? I'm going to assume 1080p is doing okay.
Yeah.
If there's like a little square at the record button spot, we're good. Yep.
Sweet. And then this is good just because
it's 45 minutes.
Yeah.
Wow.
This is at a green light still, so that's
good. We're good.
Sick. This is fun.
I know, it's so great. I'm honestly stoked because I feel like you and I connecting on this stuff, like I just feel like you're one of my favorite people to think about this stuff with. So it's good. Like I just feel like I'm genuinely like processing it. Mm-hmm. So anyway, I don't know what we were talking about, but
It definitely it does make me think. I like talking about friendship stuff because even though I love it, I care about it, I write about it, I like being friends with people. It still feels like my biggest growth category where I'm like, I don't know, I still want to become a good friend to people. And I don't know, there's times, and I'd be interested to hear from you too, especially since like you've given me feedback before. But I'd love to talk about just like friendship feedback and like not just engaging in friendship, but talking about the friendship, because I struggle with that. Like, I feel like, for example, I like working with people, but like talking about the work, like, let's say like talking about how we're going to get paid and how we're going to organize this stuff, like it just kind of like freaks me out. Like I don't like talking about the meta of like how it all works. I just like being in it.
Yeah.
I feel like the same is with friendship and stuff. It's like I like to engage in it, but like it feels very vulnerable to talk about like how am I engaging with you, and is this meaningful, and like, or feedback to them of like, hey, this was painful, or I feel a lack in this, or I noticed this.
Yeah.
And I feel like I don't do it that much because it terrifies me, and I've received it from you a couple times, and I also know you have some stories from like how a friendship got significantly more meaningful because you talked about the friendship. But I'd just love to hear like what have you learned from that, because that feels like a scary category for me of like talking about how we relate.
Yeah.
That feels very intimidating. I don't know, just because I feel like it's a very vulnerable conversation. So I don't know if you have any thoughts.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's cool that you brought it up, because I think we've talked a lot about like starting new relationships, and a lot about like when you're kind of at the cusp of a new relationship, how to get those things going. But then I think this is a really great next level for the conversation of like, you're in a friendship that's plateaued, or like is kind of, there's diminishing returns and like your satisfaction for it, and it feels like you're just kind of like stuck at a certain level of depth and meaningfulness. And I think that question specifically is like one of the biggest gates to, I think, a breakthrough in going from, kind of a surface level, we enjoy each other, we have fun together, we make jokes together type of friendship, to like, this is a person that knows me deeply and has like significantly contributed to like my life. Often what will happen, at least from my perspective, is I think people start to hit like little things that are bothering you, or things that someone said that like kind of
keeps getting shoved under, right?
Right. And people just kind of go on the defense, and it kind of limits where you're going to go. And I think I feel similarly to you, and a lot of people do, that is like a painful and scary conversation to have with someone, to say, I like our relationship, but I think it could be really cool if we learn to like, if we kind of have each other's user manuals a little bit and know what's gonna,
I like that.
Yeah, what's gonna piss us off, what's creating distance in this relationship, and what's really creating connection. But I specifically have one really pertinent memory of having that conversation with my friend Nathaniel in college, where I basically was like, hey, I don't think we have any further to go in this friendship unless we reflect a little bit and talk about like where we've been and what's worked, what hasn't. And like, there were also just things in the relationship that I was just frustrated by. And I was like, look, I'm having this conversation with you because I think we can be really, really close friends, but I'm stuck on this thing and I have some like frustration here.
Yeah.
And I just want to bring this to you because I think it's worth it to have this kind of uncomfortable conversation for us to get to the other side.
Yeah, you're like, I care so much about this friendship that I would hate to see it diminish because of these things.
Right. And it's super uncomfortable because it's risky. It's like, you could be received with something hard. Like it could be received with defensiveness, or them being like, actually, this relationship doesn't mean that much to me, and I don't actually like want to be on that level with you, which is like a very fair thing. Like, I've had to have that conversation with people sometimes where they're like frustrated that I'm not initiating with them more, and sometimes I have to be the one that's like, hey, I actually don't have capacity for this relationship right now. And that's a really painful, hard thing. And like, those are really not hard. It's hard to navigate those conversations from both sides.
Yeah.
But I would say more often than not, when it's like clear there's mutual interest, but something is like kind of off in the relationship, those types of conversations, when you have the courage to initiate them, are the portal into
glory.
Just, deep. Because it's like, once you've suffered through that together and you've had that mutual discomfort, it's like, it's just similar to any like co-suffering that you have. It's like why surfing is so bonding is like when you get pounded by double overhead sets and you're like nearly drowning and you have a struggle of a session.
Yeah.
That's super bonding because you really struggled. You really were suffering together. And I think the same is true even when it's like these reflective, hard conversations. Is like they're hard, they're uncomfortable. You've learned to be uncomfortable together, be in a space that your heart rate is a little increased and you're struggling to get your words out.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's so
That's so
triggering
true.
for the nervous system, but it's like
I start shaking during stuff like that.
it's so real. And you're an Enneagram 9, so it's like conflict and bringing stuff up with people is like one of your biggest fears.
Yeah.
But it's like that exact struggle and that pain, if you get to the other side of it, and it's like that, what's the word that they use in therapy? Like there's been repair, there's rupture, and then there's been repair. That struggle and that pain that made the repairing hard is
becomes
the thing,
like foundation.
Yeah, is the thing that makes your connection so strong on the other side.
Yeah.
So yeah, those I relate to it though. Like those are really hard conversations, and it's really vulnerable because it kind of you have to put your cards out on the table and be like, here's what this relationship means to me.
Yeah.
And it's like not only am I like kind of like I want to love you and I want to bring goodness into your life, but also like this matters to me in a more serious way. Those are really nuanced things. And like, I just think those are really hard conversations to have. And there's just a lot of room for hurt and miscommunication there. And so,
yeah, I like though, I would say like one of the things I noticed when you had that conversation with me a couple of years ago in New York, was,
which was what, like, what do you remember me bringing up?
You were talking about like the balance of like listening and speaking, where I think like, every time we'd see each other, I wanted to like share with you all the different things in my life and what was going on and stuff like that. Probably out of just like, there were exciting things and it felt personal to me, but like it was lacking kind of like, okay, but what about you and what are you experiencing? What are you learning? What excites? Like I didn't have that level of like, I cared about you. But there were parts of me that like was not caring about what you had to say and stuff like that, because maybe I was trying to fill the gap with what I had to say and I don't know, fluffing it up and making it,
which is super relatable. I think a lot of people are on either side of that in an error. Like I think some people ask too many questions and they make every hangout feel like an interview with someone, and that's a defense mechanism so that they cannot be known. And then some people also probably out of anxiety talk a lot to fill all that empty space because they're worried that the person isn't going to ask them a question, or just because like they're so concerned with what's going on in their life that they don't have a capacity to be curious about.
Totally, like the grid of like, what about you?
Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's also, I don't know, we could say a lot about that, but I think what I liked is that you prefaced it with, hey, I really enjoy our friendship. I love that we're brothers. But I feel like I think we could be more. Like I want to talk about like how we could be better friends to each other.
Yeah.
I just feel like that was just such a like, I was so quick to listen and ready to listen because I was like, oh, like if we're talking about like connecting deeper and like dreaming of an even better friendship, like I'm already in.
Right.
And so like, what are your
right? So
concerns?
Even if this is painful and hard, I'm in. Like I trust that the thing on the other side is going to be better than
exactly, because you're kind of like, I don't know, you just the way you prefaced it made me think, oh, like could we be relating better to each other? It kind of like opens up your mind to like, this doesn't have to be how it is. It can be different. So anyways, I'm just grateful for that because I feel like it prefaced it well. I feel like for people listening, it's kind of like, how do I have these kind of conversations? It's like, well, we may not have the answers for that, but at least I think like your wisdom of wanting to say like, hey, I really care about this friendship. And because I care so deeply and because I dream of it being really meaningful in the future, like I want to have this conversation.
Right.
Because I love it so much.
Right.
And because I really care about you, I feel like we could go deeper.
Right.
I feel like this could be even more meaningful for us. Like, can we talk about some of the pain points?
Because you kind of dismiss a lot of the fears that someone might have if you don't say that, where they might be worried.
Can we talk about the pain points?
Well, this person's just attacking me. They're just trying to like criticize me and telling me all the things I'm doing wrong just because they're pissed off about me.
Yeah.
And I think if you can preface with, this matters to me and I want this to be a really healthy, amazing relationship, and get the buy-in there, then all of a sudden like the painful, hard stuff is less like it's out of love. They just trust that it's out of love and desire to connect rather than desire for disconnection.
Yeah, it's true. Yeah, it's true, because like feedback without that can be really hard to receive. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know. I feel like I can feel that, and you also see it in when someone else, when you're giving feedback, but like there's not a lot of like pre-conversation or whatever, and you just kind of feel people like shrinking back and just being like, oh, this is a trap, or this is whatever.
Right.
And I feel like even though it was a difficult conversation, I didn't feel trapped. Like I didn't feel like this is just for negative feedback. It was like I could tell that you were genuinely wanting to connect more, which I liked.
Yeah, super important conversations to have. And I really do think that like more than spending increased volume of time with people, more than talking about a larger variety of topics, I really think like the biggest thing that people get stuck on that prevents them from depth in relationship is just that exact capacity to reflect on the relationship and like move through the things that prevent connection. Because inevitably in every relationship, especially in like close like married relationships, dating relationships, romantic relationships, like there will be things that do prevent you from connection, and you got to figure out how to address those.
Yeah,
in like loving, listening ways, rupture and repair.
Hard stuff.
Yeah. I think we should wrap up soon, but this has been really good and helpful for me, and I think it'll be helpful for other people. But I think the last thing I'd love to like kind of pick your brain on, or just hear more of your journey with, is back to that sort of like spiritual foundation that I really feel is at the bottom of so much of what either creates connection for us with other people or prevents us. You've had a really unique journey, I think, of faith in the like really since you became a Christian, where you haven't really stayed in the same place. Like you've gone in a lot of places, and even just the other day you were telling me like you feel less certain of anything than you ever have with it. And yet it remains such a core part of your life. So yeah, if you could just share a little bit of like what that has been like for you in the last kind of year, and just what your current season of that is, and what have been the most important things for you to like let go of in your journey of faith that you like sort of no longer see as helpful or true or life-giving?
Yeah. Well, I would say a lot of my journey, let's say in the last year, has been focused on the goodness of God. And like I feel like it's been a journey of kind of the question of like goodness and trust and stuff. I feel like there are so many different messages and images of God in our culture, in church, in scripture, that I think depending on where, like, let's say just in scripture, it's kind of like there's a lot of verses that you can kind of pick, and it sounds very flowery. It's like kind of the stuff you'd want to put in like a little calendar, like little, I know the plans I have for you, and like John 3:16, and just different stuff that like if you were to just stay in like the little really rosy passages of the Bible, or even like different sections, you just kind of think like this is very obviously how God is and what God is like. And I feel like the more you go through scripture, the more you live your life, and the more you go through different teachings and different stuff, I feel like you're always kind of asking this question, like, do I really know who God is? And do I really know who I am, and stuff like that? And I feel like I've had to come to conclusions and just kind of have like deep foundational things that that God is good, God loves people, and that more than anything, He really, really loves me. And I feel like I've gone through seasons where that's just felt shaky, or felt like unsure. And so
shaky in a way of not sure if God is real, or shaky in of like, I know God is real, but not sure how God feels about me.
Yeah, there's just like there's kind of the two-faced experience. It's kind of like, there are parts of Christianity that would make me just feel like God's just like this restoring, constantly redeeming and forgiving and selfless person that's just always just loving people and desiring people. Like there's whole books about like the furious longing of God, like all these different things about the passion, like the father heart of God and stuff. And so like I'm a father now, and so like I experience what it's like to see my own child and stuff like that. And there are parts of like scripture and the parts of the way people talk about God where you're like, oh, is this also what a good father is like? And is this like, and every person, if you read enough scripture, because I've spent a lot of time studying scripture, it's not always the same image of God. And so I feel like what was really clarifying and helpful for me was understanding that like the most accurate image of God that we've ever seen is the person of Jesus. And Jesus is even saying like, if you want to know what God is like, look at me. Like if you want to see the Father, look at my life. And I feel like that's very comforting to me because I'm like, oh, well, if God is just like Jesus, then like, how do you reconcile with the Old Testament where I can't see Jesus doing some of those things? Like I can't see him like slaying the thousands of people and commanding the armies and stuff like that. Like you just don't see Jesus doing that in the New Testament. So like you have to ask questions.
Right.
Like if you're a curious person, you can't just be like, oh, well, that's just, God just has a couple different sides of him and stuff like that. But I think in any person in our lives, the idea of like, can I trust you is huge. You know what I mean? Like if I can't trust someone, I'm not going to snuggle up in their embrace. And so like all the worship songs that are talking about like being held in God's arms and stuff like that, because some people will be like, well, it's a scary thing. It's to be, in the arms of a living or in the hands of a living God, as if like, he could smite us at any moment, but he loves us, so he doesn't, but he could smite us. And I feel like I just think like that dynamic between me and my child, like, well, I could kill this child, but I'm not going to, but that's my love for you.
Yeah, the best case scenario is for Sammy to know that you could potentially kill him anytime you wanted to.
Yeah, exactly. And I feel like that's the basis of a lot of the way that people talk about like the fear of God, like all of those different things. And it's just, it makes you kind of feel like, okay, like if my main command in scripture is to fear God, it's like, I hope that my son fears me more than anything. The foundation of his life is that he fears me.
Right.
And I feel like we try to correct that statement all the time by saying like, well, it's more like this, it's more like this. I honestly feel like it's just a language thing at this point. Like fear was like what you did to the Lord of the Manor in the 1400s. You know what I mean? Like we just don't use the word fear. Like we're always trying to backpedal and be like, well, it's not really like this. I feel like it might be time for a rebrand of the fear of God. Because I feel like it's always people just talking about like you just need to kind of be afraid of God all the time,
right?
And like healthy fear and stuff like that. And I just like I don't see that in my life with my child, and I feel like if we are all children of God, and if God is our Father and stuff like that, I just think like there's a lot of questions that come up in the Christian life and talking about like, I don't know, just all these different things. And so anyways, that has, I think, been my year, has just been like asking the question, like, how close can I be with God? And like, and can I like snuggle up in a father's embrace, like my child to him? And what kind of messages or what kind of culture do I live in with Christianity that would make me maybe think, okay, I'm going to kind of keep him at a distance. So
yeah,
does that answer some of it?
Yeah, I mean it's definitely like hard stuff because I think like and this is a thing that trips a lot of people up is like, what do you do with scripture then, and how do you like value scripture while also being like Jesus is perfect theology, and like what do I do with the Old Testament, and even like in the New Testament when it talks about like fearing God, what do I do with all of that? And I think that like is an interesting part of your journey that like really was a domino that made a whole lot of dominoes fall for me in my journey, was like seeing that there are actually multiple perspectives on like what scripture is saying and like how it's translated and what manuscripts are being used, and that scripture is like a much more complicated thing than like people who just say, well, like the Bible says obviously the Bible says like fear God. And yeah, I know Brad Jersak and like his book, A More Christ-Like Word, has been really big for both of us. But yeah, it really is like a massive
feels like a bowl of spaghetti.
Yeah, it's a can of worms and it's hard to untangle. But I do think that journey you've been on of like starting to take theology that doesn't really line up with who the character of Jesus is and how Jesus showed up.
Yeah.
Is
it's a worthy pursuit.
Yeah.
I think like that's, in the conversation of quiet, like, every time I have people over at my house, sure, I'm serving coffee and stuff, but I would say a majority of that time is me sitting at a desk in front of my journal, and I feel like it's difficult to write about that kind of stuff because it feels so existential. But I feel like that's
like
also
heady, you mean?
yeah, just like so meta, so out of like, here's what happened yesterday. Also, how does relating to the God of the universe work? And I don't know, it just feels like I have my coffee, I just hugged someone, and I look down at my journal, and I'm just kind of like asking all of these questions and voicing my frustrations and my confusion and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But I do feel like, as we said even earlier, how important that foundation is. Like, I'm so thankful, because I feel like me being convinced, like through all of these different years, that people have inherent value, and the way that God sees people, or at least I would like to believe that God sees people, I feel like has bore real fruit. Like, even when I've been in the mystery of it all and still like unsure about so many things, I feel like even the things of like, oh, like I have to go on a journey to believe that God's good or God loves people. I feel like it's not just like so that I can, I don't know, have that. Like, it feels like the implications are so big.
Yeah.
Because how I view people, how I view God is going to influence how I view people, and how I view people is obviously going to change how I live my life.
Yep.
And how I see myself.
Yeah. Yeah, it's so real. And that's why I think like it is like people kind of hate on like theology because they're like it's just like kind of heady and it misses the point and stuff like that. But I really do think like what you said, like how you believe who you believe God to be is like one of the biggest things that shapes how you show up in the world.
Mm-hmm.
And if you believe that like part of love is like people fearing you, then like you're going to show up like that.
Dang.
That's how you're going to parent Sammy. Is like you're going to need Sammy to fear you and respect you over like feeling safe with you and feeling intimacy. And if you think that God's like version of dealing with sin is like punishment and retribution rather than like restoration and healing, then that's how you're going to show up to other people's sin. You're going to see other people as like needing to know their badness, needing to punish them, needing them to feel like shame.
Yeah, like
rather
let the shame motivate you to be a better person.
Right.
Which,
two very different
which as
visions.
we've experienced, does not work.
Yeah, two very different visions of God, totally.
Yeah.
And I think, yeah, I like to nerd out about it because I also have just seen like, especially the way that I relate to people who aren't Christians or who aren't behaving the way that I like would like them to, or I see as like stuck in sin, quote unquote. I just think like having gone on that journey myself and having some shifts that like we definitely don't have time to go into today, I've just seen like real world changes in that.
I think that's important. It's like it's not just like a journey for the head. Like it does have consequences in how you deal with things.
Yeah.
And so even like, for example, all the things you could do at 5 a.m. Or all the things you could do in your spare time, I feel like probably from both of our journeys, we've just realized like it's a bit more mysterious to do that, and it's not as concrete as other things. But I feel like we've both kind of been like, yeah, but there's something in there that can't really let go of.
Yep. Well, Josh, it's clear to me that we could keep going for about 4 hours with the tea and with this, but I think that's enough for one podcast. So thanks for making the time to do this. Thanks for all the tea you made.
Yeah. Hope you enjoyed it.
It was really great. And yeah, if any of you guys have stuff you'd like us to cover just between the two of us in a conversation, hit us up in the comments or just shoot me a DM or something like that, because we won't be able to do this in person again, but we very easily can do it over Zoom.
We can both make tea.
We can both make tea separately. But if you made it to the end, thanks so much for listening. And yeah, I hope in some way this serves you and is helpful. And we don't really know what we're doing either, but it's cool to have conversations about it. And I think it's really been sweet. I think that we're both in a season where we're realizing we want to be conversation starters on how to build connection and friendship with people. So,
yeah.
Thank you.